In America's century-long romance with the automobile, the passion has never burned brighter than with hot rods. Be they immaculate show cars, gritty racers, or somewhere in between, hot rods embody the core values that made this country great. Innovation, competition, improvisation, good looks, fast cars, and the relentless drive to succeed, as told by the legends, old and new, who lived it. This is the incredible true story of an American icon, the hot rod. Hello, I'm Chip Foose. Hot rodding is a culture that was created by the greatest generation in the 30s and 40s, and then passed on to the baby boomers in the 50s and 60s. They were able to carry it for the next half century, but as they headed into the new millennium, the old guard started to become increasingly concerned that the sport would soon fade away.
Tony, Nancy, and I talked about this many years ago, and everybody in the industry has. Where are the new guys coming from? Who's going to know how to stitch upholstery? Who's going to know how to work on cars the way Pete does and recognize how it should sit and what kind of tires and wheels it should have? Fortunately, there are some young people coming up.
I'm very excited about having young people involved in this, and I love their cars. They're very clever. I mean, you know, and the thing that's nice is that there's more metal work being done now than I think has ever been done, even back in the day.
A person with painting skills, metalworking skills, a really good imagination can still change this theme that goes back as far as it does now, and that's what's happening.
We may have taught them some of it, but they've got their own way of doing it, and it's their interpretation of what we did when we were kids, as I interpreted it for what my dad was doing when he was a kid. So it's being passed on very well. There's a nice bridge right now.
When I got into the industry, you know, there's people like Barney Navarro, who's been around forever, and talking to Iski and all these old-timers that have been there, have made a living, have got their kids into it making a living, so it just turns over and turns over. All these people in the hot rod industry are always really willing to lend a hand, and, you know, any kind of business questions, they always help me out.
It's really important for more, I think, like younger people to really kind of grasp like the history of hot rodding, because we need to keep like this moving ahead.
We don't want this to end with a generation that was born maybe in the 30s and 40s. We want it to go on as long as it can, and as long as there are guys in their 20s and 30s who are stepping up now and putting their spin on it, it's going to last.
A new generation of rodders has emerged, and they've created a scene that's a collision between radical new ideas and respect for tradition. These young guys are full of passion, but to make it in this industry, it takes applying an old-school work ethic to their craft.
It's really almost a dying art. I mean, there's a lot of people trying to do this, but there's not a lot of people that are willing to work as hard. And, you know, we kind of came in at a point where people were getting older and getting out of the business, and so someone had to do it. The people that really want to be in this industry, they will work hard. There's a lot of, you know, video gamers that don't want to put in the 10 to 20 hours a day that it does take, especially when you're starting a company.
I mean, this isn't my job. This is my existence. This is my entire being. Even when I'm not working here at this shop, I'll be at home drawing something or thinking of something or coming up with ideas that will make me want to invent or create and build.
Hot rodding's an addiction. I mean, once you get one hot rod, I mean, you're hooked.
People they're into it, they're starting shops, they're starting, it's more than like hobbyists now. It's more than just a scene. It's kind of like a lifestyle, because this stuff's cool. People are having fun, the cars are cool, and it's a fun thing to do.
These days, nostalgia is all the rage in the hot rod world, and it's the young builders who are some of the prime movers behind this trend. This new generation takes the best design cues from each decade and molds them into something new. And in the process, the torch is being passed to hot rodders like Troy Ladd, one of the most acclaimed young builders in the industry. Building nostalgic-looking cars from fresh or remachined parts, modern rodders benefit from 50 years of R&D in both mechanics and aesthetics to create truly unique cars.
Troy Ladd is an example. There's a young guy who's doing what hot rodders have done since time immemorial, taking the basis, something like a 32 Ford Roadster, and put their own spin on it.
The Hollywood hot rod style, our motto is respect tradition, but we respect it, but we're not bound by it. I like the traditional aesthetic, I like the traditional style, but I need a little bit of creative outlet. We'll move lines, change things, just add to it. It's almost a little bit more of, even though our hot rods are hot rods, they're still more almost customs. Again, the impact, traditional hot rod. But if you look closer and you know your history, you'll know that what we're doing is not necessarily period correct traditional hot rodding. A really good example of this is my own car. It's called Respect Tradition. It's a 32 steel roadster body, section 2 inches. We've moved the wheel wells. Every steel panel has been moved a little bit. Rounded corners, we made little recesses that match the factory Ford design. It's got 392 Hemi, Hillborn injection. Looks dead nuts like it's a traditional top fuel dragster engine. But it's got hidden electronic injection, hidden sensors in the vintage distributor. So we've kind of not deterred from what it really is, but just enhanced it a little bit, which wouldn't have been done, in the 50s. It's really more reserved for like custom cars. So by doing that, we keep that traditional impact, that traditional aesthetic, but we've kind of exaggerated it just a little to give it a little bit more bang.
Troy's ability to custom fabricate new parts with a nostalgic look was evident in the unique Model T truck he built to compete for the 2009 America's Most Beautiful Roadster Award.
This is the world-famous Black Widow. We were able to take a plastic model and make it into a real one-to-one version of a car, which never existed.
The Black Widow model I got as a Christmas present in 1960. I remember building it, and that was always one of my favorites.
We literally took this plastic model and scaled it with calipers and multiplied it by the scale and did the real parts measured off of the model, which is like, just insane. Since it was never a real car, there weren't really accurate suspension pieces and things like that that actually were ever on the road. So what we had to do is try to take what they had and create it into a working collaboration of parts to turn it into a one-to-one version of a fake car.
The idea of building the real Black Widow was to use as many original components as we can establish that were on the model.
We worked from the scale of the model, so we would measure everything, multiply by 24, and turn it into the real part. It worked better than we would have expected, to be honest. There was a few things that just wouldn't jive, like the wheelbase and the engine compartment got a little bit long. So we did take 2 inches out of the engine compartment. That was a little bit of a deviation from the scale model, but it made the proportions of the car come alive. And even talking to one of the model designers, everyone's shocked that it actually worked out as close as it did.
In less than a decade, Troy's show-stopping creations have already helped him rise through the ranks to become one of the top builders in the country.
Yeah, these are some pals from Hollywood Hot Rods. You got to check out this coupe. Troy's brought some good competition here. I'm just in love with the back fenders and also the way they've Coke bottled the side of the car. See, this has a really nice sweep to it. And it's still traditionally styled, nice and low. This is really sweet.
We already are well known for our own design track, which is, in hot rodding, very hard to do. How do you do something that everyone's doing and your personal version of it's a little different? I work hard to do this, and I work all aspects of this too. And again, as I sit today, I was just given the Builder of the Year of 2010. We were Trendsetter of the Year 2008 at SEMA. I guess the most important thing is to be respected by your peers. When other builders, recognize you and respect you, it's a pretty huge honor.
The Ford Flathead and the four-cylinder that came before it were the original engines that powered hot rod culture into the early 50s. With nostalgia playing such a huge role in the culture today, these iconic power plants are making a comeback of their own, thanks in part to Mike and Max Herman of H&H Flatheads.
It's a family business, but we all have our own sections. So it keeps us from stepping on each other's toes. So my brother does all the four-cylinder stuff, I do all the V8 flatheads, and my dad does all the one-off stuff. So it all keeps us in our separate directions, but we all work out of the same roof.
I do mainly the Model A, B, and Model T motor, all the inline four-cylinder flathead stuff, anywhere from 1909 to 1932. What we do basically is we convert these old engines from, you know, the old bearing technology back then to modern day technology. We do a lot of counterweighting of the crankshafts. We convert them all to insert bearings. We make new connecting rods for them. We do a lot of improvements for the valve train. We basically find the weak points in these motors and upgrade them. My dad started doing four-cylinder stuff in 1970. And back then he thought, man, how many of these motors can I actually build before, you know, it's all gone. I said the same thing when I started, but Ford made 20 million Model A's and Model T motors, and they said there's still about 1 million of them left. So there's plenty of work to do. Michael's done an awesome job with his side of the business. He came in here and he started doing the V8 flatheads, and Michael's just pretty much taken it like to another level.
Well, the name flathead came from all the valves are in the block, whereas the overhead, all the valves are up in the head. So it is a flat head. It's only about 2 inches thick. The flathead V8 was the first V8 Ford did. I mean, that's what Americans use to get by all the trucks and everything. It really has a piece in American culture. The myth of overheating and cracking, yeah, they all crack, but no one took care of their cars back then. And nowadays, with new water pumps, seal bearings, I acid dip all these blocks, everything's better than it was back then. And the looks of it, I mean, you have fins, you have a lot of chrome, you have something that looks different, a lot of bolts on each side, no valve covers. And so, I mean, it really taps into the history and people wanting to recreate history.
In a surprisingly short time, Mike has carved out a name for himself as one of the premier flathead builders in the industry.
I build engines for everybody, all over the country, all over the world. Shops like Brizio and Boyd Coddington. Jimmy Shine approached me about updating his 34. And so we built a stroker motor and put the Scott blower on it, and it hauls ass. It's really gratifying, you know, when these big hot rod shops, they're calling me on my cell phone on Sunday. Driving a flathead-powered car, it's awesome. The torque of the motor, the sound of the motor, and just knowing it's not a fuel-injected 350 Chevy.
You know, small block Chevys, that stuff's all like way played out. So now everybody's going back to the old school traditional stuff.
You can't put anything on a 350 Chevy to make it as good looking as a flathead. These things look like a piece of art, a piece of jewelry. You could tell what 32s have Chevys in them because they have hoods.
Mike's passion for building quality flatheads has impressed some of the biggest names in the sport.
Barney Navarro was a true pioneer in the industry. He actually started working for Phil Wine, machining his manifolds. He was telling Phil, you know, you should really change this and do this, get better flow. And Phil told him, then why don't you make your own stuff? And that's what Barney did. He started in '46 when he got back from the war and started making his own stuff. He's been in all aspects of hot rodding.
After 5 years of a close friendship and mutual respect, Barney chose Mike to carry on the Navarro name.
I bought Navarro racing equipment from Barney about 5 years ago, and we just kind of threw it out there because we knew he was getting old and tired of doing this. And we just said, hey, you know, when you're interested in selling, just give us a call. Everybody that knew Barney knew that he maintained a high-quality product, and he wouldn't just give away his heads and his company. I mean, that's what he's worked his whole life for, and he wasn't just going to let it disappear. And then a letter came in the mail saying, we want to sell the company to you. Luckily, I had the money at the time. I just asked them how much they want and wrote a check. I mean, it was just that simple. He gave me the respect to carry it on. It is a privilege to own Navarro and to be a friend of his. You know, we had his memorial service here at the shop. I mean, that's how much of a friend he became.
Barney's legacy lives on, not just through Mike's hard work, but also in an exhibit at the Wally Park's NHRA Motorsports Museum, featuring memorabilia and his restored Lakes Roadster.
They've had Barney's car at the museum for at least 10 years. Every time I go down there, I just go and wish I could drive it, but I don't want to touch it or scratch it. They've let me put all my Navarro extra patterns, and I have old checkbooks and all sorts of memorabilia in there. It's a great honor that museum is there and lets people see these kind of things.
It's not easy making your mark on a culture with so much history behind it. But one group of young hot rodders have succeeded in creating something new while preserving rodding's outlaw image. A sometimes controversial, but always eye-catching type of car, the rat rod. The term rat rod is a controversial moniker, one that is often meant as a term of endearment, but taken as an insult. Some people consider rat rods to be cobbled together junk piles, while others feel it is merely a way of lumping together a similar aesthetic. What is for certain is that the raw, unfinished hot rod look is king with youth culture, despite how far away the cars often stray from tradition.
Today we have something called, rat rods and rat rodders, and it's a group of primarily younger people that can really took a hard look back at our history in hot rodding, and they saw something that just touched them in the old style, where cars were more about a look, an attitude, and being able to be innovative without spending a fortune.
The rat rod crowd really kind of takes just about anything and makes it into a hot rod. It might not necessarily be something that you would ever really consider making into a hot rod.
I love it because it brought a whole new generation of people into a sport that had kind of got stuck. And, you constantly need new. I mean, it's about fashion, even though we probably don't like to admit that. But there are definite, trends that come and go. But they definitely got their own aesthetic, and they definitely add things that weren't there in the old days. They like the rust and no floorboards, which if you talk to a lot of older hot rodders, that kind of wasn't how it was. They worked real hard to make their cars nice, and even if they could only afford primer, they'd polish that primer as best it could be. So it's different, but it's great that it's different.
The younger guys really like them. I like them. I mean, they get pretty wild sometimes. In the most case, I think it's just more of a early style, traditional, what you could get a hold of, We're not all going to be able to afford a chrome dropped axle, Sometimes you got to heat them up and bend them, just like they used to.
These are home-built cars that are supposed to respect traditional influences. Some of the issues I have with it is they're getting a little bit off track, what I would call them more as art cars in a way, because some of them are built for shock value and just out-of-this-world proportions and things that weren't done in the 50s. They're not built for 50s styling. They're not built for performance. They're not built for aesthetics. When that culture starts to go too far that direction, I don't think it's necessarily healthy. If anyone wants to express themselves in automotive form, I support it and respect it.
I'm all for it, as long as it's safe. Some of the cars I see, I get a little scared because they don't look very safe. But to see the younger people get involved, I think that's what we need.
This is a 1927 Ford Model T Coupe. Found the body on eBay in Idaho, actually. And it was a complete car all the way down to the wooden wheels, all original. And I took it home and built everything else. I chopped the top about 8 inches. My headlights are 34 Buick Roadster, and I have 39 Ford taillight and just different kinds of stuff on it. And that's what pretty much they did back then too. They just found whatever they could and they put it on the car just to make it go faster, make it look cool. The bullet holes, they were actually put there by the previous owner. When he was a little kid, he learned to shoot and he took target practice at this car. It's a hot rod. I know people, they'll fight me on it and say it's a rat rod and stuff just because how it looks, but I think a rat rod is just more like you've thrown it together and didn't really take your time on it. And, it's not safe and this and that, but I built my car to be driven hard and be safe at the same time.
And what you see in what we're now calling a rat rod really is
50s hot rod. You know, sometimes a little exaggerated, you know, slammed down maybe more than they used to be, or chopped much more severely than they used to be. But basically, you squint at them a little bit and you say, this is 1950s all over again.
Over the last 5 years, I mean, it's gotten so traditional. You know, 10 years ago, everything was billet and shaved and modern parts, and, you know, everything's going back to the old parts, and I like the way it's going.
It's just fun. It's pretty much what it is, you know, I like doing it. And if that means being a little bit different than having a newer car or something like that, then that's what it is.
It's a great movement. I mean, I think it's the future of what hot rodding is. My ego wouldn't let me have a rat rod, but I think they're having way more fun than guys with a lot more expensive cars.
In any art form, it takes fresh infusions of talent and passion to keep things from getting stale. And as each generation brings something new to the table, so too do subsequent generations reinterpret and reimagine the styles of their predecessors. Without this new group of hot rodders, we'd be in danger of seeing the culture slowly but surely wither away. But despite their youth and their sometimes shocking sensibilities, young builders have helped sustain and even advance hot rod culture. And they've only just begun. I'm Chip Foose. Thanks for watching. Next time on American Icon, the hot rod.
The hot rod movement is totally American. I think it embodies a lot of things that are at the heart and soul of America.
How cool has it got to be 70 or 80 years old and get back in a race car that you raced 40 or 50 years ago? I mean, it's a time machine.
There's the noise and the wind and the speed and the paint and the shine and all the stuff that goes with it. And I think that people are looking for a simpler time of their life.